Hello, everybody. My name is Greg Howell. Before I do the introduction, I'd just like to do the acknowledgement. I respectfully acknowledge the Kuumberi people of the Yugambeh language region, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. I pay my respect to the elders past and present and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So thank you everybody for coming. This is the first public event for the new Gold Coast branch of Renew. It's very exciting for us, and it's very exciting. We've actually got someone who knows what they're talking about, and I'll actually introduce Brett Milne in a minute to talk to us about virtual power plants. Brett has got a wealth of experience, particularly in the corporate life and in the energy industry, and he'll be talking to us about the work that he's doing with virtual power plants. So, Brett, over to you. Thank you.
One of those unfortunate people who need my glasses to see here, but not there. But I think that's going to be too small, so I'll just have to see how I go. But hopefully I know my stuff well enough. Hang on, let me click on that. Okay, so before we talk about virtual power plants, I thought we'd talk a little bit about what is this energy transition. When you read the media, there's lots of conversation about energy transition and transformation. I just thought we'd talk a bit about that, just to get a feel for what we're actually talking about, because understanding that helps you understand the role of virtual power plants and some of the other technologies that are coming along. So in the traditional energy space, everything was about hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons powered power stations, they powered our transport, they powered just about everything that we could think about doing. And obviously hydrocarbons and the climate are great companions, and so as a process of removing hydrocarbons from our energy cycle, we need to transition to something new. And so there's a lot of change happening, and there's a lot of technology that's coming along. And there's things, you'll heard a lot about hydrogen at the moment. Everyone seems to be wanting to invest in hydrogen, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen. Now, blue hydrogen is just a bit of a furphy. You really have to focus on the green hydrogen story. Because blue hydrogen requires hydrocarbons to create hydrogen, so I'm not quite sure what the benefit is to the long-term future. But green hydrogen and solar panels, wind farms together as a mix of energy technologies will allow us to transition away from hydrocarbons. And that's not just about direct power into our homes and our businesses, it's also about our sailing fleets, our vehicle fleets. I've left, you can see on my graph there, I've got left planes blue. I don't think anyone's quite got a solution for aircraft yet, but most of the other technologies either in development or trialling or rolling out as we speak. And in Queensland, New South Wales, there are large moves to build large green hydrogen production. And there are solar farms everywhere, and if you look on everyone's roof places, there are mini solar farms. And so that transition is starting to take place. But why is this important? Well, if you have a look at the graph, the actual cost of energy now, so in Australia, the cheapest cost of energy is a large solar farm, and it's down to around, this is US dollars, $39 a megawatt hour. That's really cheap. When I was in the energy industry 4 years ago, the average price we paid, mostly from coal-fired power, was around $75 a megawatt hour. So you can see that large-scale solar is really driving down the cost. In Australia, that's the case. In other markets, it's wind. In other markets, it will be hydro that will drive out the cost of what's happening. You can also see here on the right, the changes that are happening to power price and the actual technology prices and how quickly they're dropping away. So not only are technologies coming, but they're coming at a much cheaper price every day. In 2018, the top left-hand side there, you can see that the energy mix was still largely carbon, and it's still largely carbon in Queensland and Australia, but that is changing. In fact, yesterday, we had the largest demand day in Queensland, yesterday the day before, the largest demand day for energy in Queensland. A large chunk of that during the middle of the day was provided by solar. So there's a big drive for that to happen. In fact, because some of our sites are exposed to the market, we got 45 cents a kilowatt hour for feed-in tariff. So there's great opportunities as that evolving market takes place. The other thing that people don't understand about the energy transition is that what we currently supply with the power stations isn't going to cut it. So we actually will see a massive uplift in energy demand. As you electrify vehicle fleets, as you electrify industry, as you further electrify houses and remove gas from cooking, etc., there's this uplift in the requirement for more and more energy in the community. And so not only do we have to replace what's currently there, we need to replace significantly more than that. And if Queensland rolls down a green hydrogen space, then the uplift required is that light blue bit that we require additional energy in our market before 2050. So the energy transition is not just about replacing what we do today, it's about enabling what comes next and the way that we run our industries and our communities in the future. And down the bottom, you can see that's a forecast for ramp up of electric vehicles in Europe. So at the moment, electric vehicles are a small part of the process. But even on this map, electric vehicles are still a small part of the future energy demand. It's really industry and it's going to drive what we need to create as part of our energy transition. The other story is energy storage is coming. You can see there's a significant increase year on year of energy storage being installed with solar panels in residential homes. Interestingly, when there's a government incentive, that number jumps in each state, and when the incentive stops, the number drops away. So there's still a lot of opportunity there for people to pick up solar with batteries as part of it. But there are lots of other energy storage technologies that are coming, part of the transition. Pumped hydro, Queensland has significant pumped hydro resources at Weve Dam. There's more being built in North Queensland. You've got batteries, which everyone sees, and everyone hears about Tesla's big battery and another big battery that the Victorian government's building. The batteries are going up everywhere. You've got EVs, which will become bi-directional. So that will mean that people can use their EV to run their house at night. They might charge it at work during the day, come home at night, use some of the battery storage to run their home, which means they're moving energy from one location to another in a very new way to how we've traditionally done it. You've got other things like supercapacitors. There's companies jumping up all over the place building this supercapacitor technology. And then you've got things like compressed air storage and even the faithful old flywheel, which was an early industrial revolution invention, is making a comeback as a way of storing energy. So there are lots of new technologies coming to solve the storage problem, and storage is a big part of what we need to do. You know, there's lots of moving parts, but the key, I guess the key message is in terms of what needs to happen with the energy transition is there's a lot of digitization, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information that we need to manage and sort through. There's a large move to decentralisation. So if you think about Queensland 10 years ago, most of the coal-fired power stations were in about 4 locations around the state. Now solar farms, wind farms, hydro plants, rooftop solar is spread all over the state. As a consequence of that, it's very decentralised now, and managing that becomes a much more complex problem. Also, we need much more flexibility. It's interesting when you watch a solar panel and you see a sun on our system and you see a cloud go over the building or the location, you can see significant drops in voltage, significant drops in power available. We need systems that are flexible to be able to cope with the vagrancies of weather, because a lot of the renewable technologies are based on weather, sunshine, wind, etc., water. So we need to be able to understand how we can have a flexible system to manage the impacts of the climate on the actual products that we're running. And then you've got industry, you know, large parts of our industry today still rely on gas generation. They still rely on traditional hydrocarbon generation. So being able to transition that to electricity is important. Cement industry, the biggest producer of carbon emissions, needs to transition away from their traditional dirty processes to new green processes. Significant impact on our energy demand and also on the way that industry is electrified. And the same with energy transfer. You know, Tesla and everyone's out there selling vehicles, but that's just a small part of the pie. Shipping, aircraft, they're a big contributor to our carbon footprint, and they need to also move to electrification of some description, whether that's via hydrogen and then generating electricity in the vehicle, or it's electric from a battery, but those things are still happening. So all that background then says, well, why do I need a virtual power plant? This is the changing world that we're looking at. And at Karit, we started life about 4 years ago, and our pure purpose in life is to build virtual power plants. We don't install solar panels on roofs, we don't do any of that work. We work with our customers to create virtual power plants to allow them to bring control to their environment. I'm just going to play you a short video, which will give you a quick snapshot of what a virtual power plant is.
Produced in large power stations, then distributed and sold to homes and businesses. But with the rapidly increasing number of solar panels and energy storage systems across the globe, that's all changing. Introducing Karit, a new energy management platform that spreads the benefit of captured sunlight well beyond a single building, enabling large numbers of solar systems to be brought together to create a virtual power plant. Communities can now harness this power using distributed energy assets to build a virtual power plant to benefit all members, manage energy demand, and move surplus energy into the market. A Karit virtual power plant also addresses fundamental challenges, such as the impact of climate change and customer affordability through a sustainable source of renewable energy. Take advantage of this next generation technology to own and operate your virtual power plant. Karit, the future of energy.
Sorry for the blatant advertisement, that wasn't the intent. The intent was just to try and help you understand what a virtual power plant is. So a virtual power plant is basically bringing all these distributed energy resources together so that you can see them as one unit. A couple of examples where we've done this in New Zealand in the Wairarapa Valley. Some of you who like red wine will know lots about the Wairarapa Valley. We worked with a local retailer there to connect up about 5 different cities or towns in that valley. And we had schools, wineries, residential homes, commercial buildings, all connected together with solar panels, batteries, running together in one, so it looked like one power plant in the market. It was lots of little different systems, but together it provided the opportunity for the retailer to participate. Here on the Gold Coast, the Gold Coast City Council in this building is part of a virtual power plant. And we're together with the Gold Coast City Council rolling out buildings. All the buildings in the Gold Coast will have solar, battery, some other biogen type stuff brought together as one single virtual power plant. And that basically allows all those distributed assets and dispersed assets to be managed as a single entity. And I'll talk about why that's important. So Karit does a few things in terms of the virtual power plant and all virtual power plants. Not just Karit, there are other people in Australia who offer virtual power plants. And they basically allow you to shift energy from when it's not necessary to be used. So in the middle of the day in Queensland, for example, there is so much solar on a normal day in winter being pushed into the grid that the price of energy in the market is less than $1,000, minus $1,000. So if you're a producer, a solar farm producer trying to sell your energy into that market, you're on a loss. So the idea is you store that energy, and then at night time when the sun goes down and the demand spikes, everyone comes home, starts cooking their dinner or whatever it is they're doing, then you can release the energy that you've stored into the market and offset your costs to run it. So whether that's as a retailer, like an Origin or an AGL, or as a business or just residential customers who've got battery systems, they can take advantage of this, the changing market, and move energy around. With Gold Coast City Council, we take energy like this building where there's excess solar, push it in, and they use it at other buildings where they've got not enough generation for the site to cover the load. So it offsets their cost of electricity from the retail market and allows them to use more renewable energy in their overall energy footprint. You can also use it to manage peak demand. So if you run a business, it's a large business, Queensland energy providers love to charge you for demand. So every time you'll use a lot of energy sharply, they charge you a large fee for it. So using a virtual power plant, you can actually smooth out that energy flow, reduce your costs. You can also use it to play in frequency markets. I'll talk about what that means. There's all sorts of opportunity to bring stability to the way the grid works. So the virtual power plant brings all of this capability to these assets to allow them to participate more equally. How does it work? In the case of Karit and most of the virtual power plant providers, they put some sort of IoT device. We call ours a Karit cake, and they connect that to the assets out in in the wide world. And we bring all the data and information back up into our virtual power plant cloud, and we push out commands and instructions back out to those devices to say to a battery charge, discharge, to a cogen unit on a biogas to dispatch energy at a point in time. Some opportunity exists to talk to things like heat pumps, air conditioners to turn them down, turn them up. So you're managing the total energy of a site or a process or a group of customers to get a better benefit. So the Karit cake does the connectivity bit at the edge of the grid where you've got your devices, and then the cloud manages and orchestrates the energy flows across all those different devices. A Karit cake is not that big. It's about the size of a shoebox for someone with really skinny feet. So what are some of the use cases for a virtual power plant? Well, this is a real live case. So this is energy trading in the New Zealand market. We do the same thing in Australia. I just use this case because it was really cool. Because this is a battery charging and discharging in one day. So normally if you run your battery at your home, if you've got a battery, it'll fill up when the sun's shining, and then at night time you'll turn on and you'll use it to run your TV and your stoves and things while you're cooking your meals, doing that sort of stuff. That's about the maximum use you get out of that battery. Using the virtual power plant and responding to the market, we were able to charge and discharge that battery 3 times in one day. As a consequence of that connected to a small battery system, like in terms of commercial, it generates about $1 million a year additional value for the owner of that battery system, just from being able to participate actively in the market. You can see here, this is the market price, and at the bottom, and that's the fluctuating market price. That happens in every market, in Australia, New Zealand, the US, where they have active market participation. And so that happens in Queensland. And so we're able to employ this same concept. This is just what we call energy arbitrage, or managing the market to maximise the value. The next one, everyone have heard of the Tesla big battery in South Australia at Hornby. So the number one purpose for that, other than they make a lot of money arbitraging, but the number one purpose for that battery being put in place was to manage frequency response. So most networks like to run their grid between 50.15 and 49.85 hertz. Don't worry about the technical stuff, but that's the sweet spot for a network. Outside of those, you start to get lots of issues like brownouts and blackouts and things. So the networks try and maintain the frequency across the grid in that window. Now, when a large generator trips off, you'll have a frequency spike. Or if you have too much load being put into the grid, you'll get frequency spikes. And so the batteries are used by the virtual power plants to offset those frequency spikes. So when the frequency hits, let's say 49.85, so it drops, then the battery will then dispatch or charge, depending on what it's trying to do. So if it's trying to raise the frequency, it will dispatch. If it's trying to drop it, it will charge the battery. And so as it does those actions in the marketplace or in the grid, then it brings frequency back into harmony, and then we avoid blackouts. So the big Tesla battery, that's its sole purpose, but it's just part of a broader virtual power plant that they've built in South Australia with thousands of homes which also participate in that virtual power plant. Another use case is forecasting. When you're producing energy off a coal-fired power station, it's really easy. You turn it on in the morning, the thing just spins all day and produces a nice steady flow of energy out the door. When you're using renewable energy in your grid, that doesn't happen. It's up, it's down, the sun shines, clouds go, the wind stops, storms come, you've got to turn off the wind turbines. You get this really intermittent nature of the generation sources in the grid. So being able to build sophisticated forecasting is really important. And this is where the digitization and the analysis comes into place. At Karit, we employ data scientists whose pure job it is to build those forecasting tools and modeling. We use machine learning and AI to forecast that automatically into the future. So we know that, as you can see here, what the generation is going to look like against our forecast. As virtual power plant providers, there's a new set of AEMO rules coming. We will need to provide those forecasts to AEMO to give them a sense of what's happening in terms of the assets connected to the grid so that they can maintain stability. How does that work when you've got thousands of solar panels on thousands and millions of rooftops? That's part of why virtual power plants become important. When you've got so many distributed systems, bringing them together to bring a level of control becomes really important. Here's another case. This is a demand case. So here you can see two situations. This is one building, but I better be careful I don't run off the screen. You can see there on the left-hand side, that's a normal operating pattern for that building. And that every time that blue line, when it's up, they get charged $20, $30 a kilowatt. And that might be 1,000 kilowatts that factory's running. That's costing them a lot of money. And each month it resets. So what the VPP or the virtual power plant does, it allows you to manage the batteries to offset those spikes or that pattern of demand. So when you can see there, when the solar drops away, the demand spikes because the solar is offsetting the grid, and that's the grid that's driving that. The other issues here are like when there's a sunny day and when it's a cloudy day and the sun keeps peaking up, you got this up and down with your solar production, and it creates a lot of demand issues. So using the battery again allows companies and businesses to offset that. Now, interesting, in Queensland, our friends at Energex and Ergon have just introduced demand charging for residential customers. If you have solar, if you look at your bill, you'll have a demand charge. So they've started to do the same thing at residential level to help them manage their grid better. So instead, they won't charge you as much for your fixed fee, but you'll get smacked with a demand charge. And in most businesses, the demand charge is 50% of their cost. So if they start to push residential homes the same way, they need to be able to control your solar so that it's not jumping up and down on a cloudy day. It becomes more important. That's virtual power plants. The story about the Karit, I'll give you that now at the end. So when we started this business, we were looking around thinking, what the hell can we use to represent what virtual power plants are? And we came across carrots. You think about a carrot, the stalks stick up in the air and they use the sun to produce energy, which they then store in the orange bulb or the tube of the carrot. Along comes Farmer Joe, picks it up out of the ground, throws it on his truck, sends it to market and sells it. And so we use that as our inspiration for where carrot comes from. And in essence, virtual power plants are much the same. We're trying to control the energy and produce the energy so we can get it efficiently into the market. As you saw before, with that massive growth of energy required and being delivered by distributed resources, that's going to become more and more difficult. Any questions?
Yes. And I'm just going to do it in the order.
Yep.
Are you using, and you can see it here, are you using electric voltage spikes in the grid and keep within the frequency band?
Am I using what? Alexis?
Alexis.
We use all sorts of different technologies.
You'll have to repeat my question.
Yeah, so we're using Alexis. Alexis is a type of technology they use for managing voltage. It's one of many different technologies. Karit as a business is agnostic, so we play with anybody. So if one of our customers was using Alexis, then we would work out how to make it work. So that's just an example of one of the technologies coming that will permeate this space to help bring control to the energy market and the energy grid. Question, yeah?
With your virtual power plant, you still have poles and wires, transformers.
Yep.
So all that infrastructure stays the same. That way you're able to transfer your power along distance.
Yep, that's right. But the challenge with the poles and wires business is that they were traditionally built to send energy one way. With distributed energy being spread all over the place, particularly on rooftops and factory roofs, etc., the energy is flowing up and down that grid now. And so that creates voltage swings, and then that's what results in frequency brownouts, etc. So virtual power plants are required to help bring some control to that energy flow to help keep those grids stable. When I was working at Ergon a few years ago, we had some feeders where more than 50% of the customers had solar on their rooftop, and when a summer storm went over, it would create significant shifts in voltage and demand. So being able to manage that is really important.
Another question.
If you could repeat the questions, because
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
we can't hear it.
Yep.
We're not as technical as we need to.
That's okay. That's all right.
Keep on asking them.
I'll just repeat the question.
So with your virtual power plant, are you going to have big batteries in like suburbs where all the solar feeds into, so you can
So the question is, with virtual power plant, do we have big batteries or do we rely on people with batteries in their home? I guess it doesn't matter. From a virtual power plant perspective, we manage them all in a similar way. How that plays out will largely be driven by business models and economics. So there'll be some instances where it's more cost efficient to put a big battery in an estate to manage the solar. There'll be other instances where people will run along and put solar batteries in their homes, and then they'll have a lot of batteries in that. I think we're going to have a mix, and you're going to have lots of different technologies providing that storage. And so as all those different technologies come along, being able to provide a layer that manages that will become that's the important bit. So the end solution will be driven by the economic value that's created by that solution. So big batteries might be more cost effective in some markets and less so in others.
Okay, I'll ask the question here. How do you treat transmission and distribution charges? Is that a question for you?
Yep.
And you have to repeat that again.
So how do we treat transmission and distribution charges? Again, like I said before, with the demand charges, that's a distribution charge, and we try and minimise that where we can. So it depends on the structure of tariffs, and to talk about tariffs today and what those tariffs will look like in 10 years' time is almost an impossibility. In New Zealand, for example, they're currently doing a pilot where at an individual house, you could have multiple providers. So you might have someone who's buying your solar off you. You might have someone who's providing your normal energy to your home. You might have someone who's just providing you energy to charge your electric vehicle, someone to run your heat pump. That's being trialled at the moment in New Zealand, where you might have multiple people at your front door providing you services. So as that happens, then the types of tariffs and things that will happen will be quite different. In New South Wales, they're testing local area tariffs where if your energy stays inside your transformer or your substation, you pay less. So there's that whole space around tariffs is going to change.
So I'll ask one more question here. So this is a question from Marcus. Does Karit also act as energy retail, or would your clients like to have a separate contract that they can negotiate?
Yeah, so Karit doesn't act as a retailer. So the question is, does Karit act as a retailer, or do our customers have a separate one? Our customers have their own retailer that we work with. So the Gold Coast City Council has a retailer, and we work with that retailer. Some of our customers are retailers. So they roll out a VPP across their customer base, and they provide those retail services, and we provide the VPP. Each, as again, one of those things, this is a new space, and the market and models are evolving. In the USA, there isn't no competitive retail. There's just a generator, retailer, and a distribution business. It's just one business, looks after the whole state. How the VPP will work in that space will be quite different again.
So with the example you gave with the Gold Coast Council, with this building producing enough, are there other buildings not producing enough and you're shifting the power? How is that actually working in real life? Like how is that distribution charge being applied? How is the recipient's energy bill reflecting?
Yeah, so at the moment, right, so the question is, at a building where you've got a building with a surplus of energy and a building with a deficit of energy, and you're shipping it across, how does the network charges apply? So at the moment, that still happens through the energy market. And so you will incur distribution charges at the target location for the energy. And you may in the future incur distribution charges for the export that you send to the grid. That's still being debated at a regulatory level. However, being able to reconcile what I send and what I received is really important. So part of the virtual power plant is managing that reconciliation process. There's talk of using blockchain and some other technologies to do that. But right now, every building has an electricity meter attached to it, and they work pretty well. So you can use those to collect the data and then help manage that process. But if you're thinking about the way you negotiate with if you're a big business and think about how you negotiate with your retailers and your networks, having control gives you much more opportunity to negotiate in a different way.
Do you have like a minimum system size that you kind of want to bring into the system, or
does Karit have a minimum system size?
Yeah, you or
a virtual power plant will work with your average house with 5 kilowatts of solar or 6 kilowatts of solar and a 10 kilowatt hour battery. That can be part of a virtual power plant. It doesn't really matter about the size, it's the combined size that's the important thing. For example, to trade frequency, you need a certain mass of storage to be able to participate in the frequency market. So that could be 1,000 homes, or it could be one big battery. It just depends how you want to approach the problem. Karit ourselves, we tend to focus on commercial installations and retailers and communities. So, but some of our customers, our energy retailers, they're really happy to connect lots and lots of residential customers to their virtual power plant.
How resilient
Well, the question is how resilient is the system? So there's no, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so energy will always flow to the point where it's needed most. So unless someone was to turn everything off, that's an issue. But
Could you repeat that question?
so the question is, can virtual power plants be hacked? Yeah, they can. Anything can be hacked. The value of the hacking or what the impact is depends on how that works. So there's a lot of security. In the case of Karit, every device has its own unique security code process that if I picked it up and moved it somewhere else, it doesn't work. And it's related to the device that it's connected to and the way it connects to the cloud. But yeah, you could hack, obviously IT, you can hack anything, but because it's distributed, then, and most virtual power plants don't necessarily, for example, they don't necessarily turn solar systems on and off. They will manage batteries, but the solar will just run as a consequence. In South Australia, there is trials looking to provide some control over solar systems to turn them down. Again, that will come with its own risks, but that's part of running an IT shop and managing the risks and making sure that you can't get hacked.
Can I just ask one from here again? So the question is, for household in particular, what is it about the VPP that appeals to a household in your experience?
Okay, so the question is, from a household in particular, what is it about a VPP that appeals? Let me tell you about my own house. So my own house is connected to a retail that exposes me to the market. Yesterday in Queensland, the market got a bit volatile and I made 45 cents a kilowatt hour off my feed-in tariff. And I was able to manage my load very well and make a small profit. The guys who work for Karit, who have their houses connected to our VPP, most of them get paid by their retailer to be customers. So the VPP will bring additional value that you're not seeing from a standard system, because your standard solar battery system is designed just to manage the load at a time when the load's required. Whereas a virtual power plant allows you to take advantage. For example, during winter, my battery at home, if I just left it in self-use mode, I might only use 30% overnight. So there's 70% of my batteries sitting there not being exploited. So by using the virtual power plant, I can push that additional energy into the market at the best price times to earn additional revenue from my battery. And so that case applies whether I'm a business, residential, or whatever. And as I said, as the tariffs evolve around this space, we're going to see more and more innovative ways of pricing that.
From the audience?
So if you're exposed to the price where I see the market, you just described,
yep,
taking advantage of the positive. What about the occasion where you own the power?
So what happens when the price goes down is the question? Yeah, or goes up. If you're exposed, yeah, well, you have to be like me and run around town, the air conditioners off, and tell kids to go to the movies. You do have that risk. So managing more than, that's why virtual power plants will evolve to manage more than just the batteries and the solar. And a lot of our customers are asking us to provide control of things like air conditioning. Now, we're not going to do that ourselves, but we'll partner with other organisations who can control that. Heat pumps are another classic example. In New Zealand, you know, lots of houses have heat pumps. The ability to manage those makes a lot of sense. Yeah, demand. We haven't got a case now, but our platform works for demand management exactly the same as it does for any other trigger, whether it's a price. So you could pre-charge a battery on weather. For example, you know tomorrow's going to be hot. You want to make sure your battery's full, so you could pre-charge it overnight to make sure it's ready for tomorrow. So you just, those triggers, and that AI and machine learning around our forecasting is where that's going for us, so that we'll be able to forward predict what we want to be able to do with those assets, and then within 5-minute increments make those things sing based on what the future's telling us it looks like. Yes, Greg.
With these local city councils, you have what sort of savings?
So the Gold Coast City Council benefit from the virtual power plant. We're still working that through because it's pretty much, we've been working with them for a while on small buildings where we've seen savings, particularly in demand costs for them. But now as we roll it out across all of their buildings or more of their buildings, we'll see a change in those savings and how that works. But they've been able to realise savings just from being able to export and import their own energy with their retailer. So there's lots of different models that they're actually applying. And because they've got such a diverse set of buildings, every building has a different use case of the virtual power plant. So some buildings like this building, pretty simple, but a big aquatic centre with heating and all that sort of stuff, that's a different kettle of fish. A sewage treatment plant is again a very different kettle of fish. So each case has to be managed on its own merit and then worked out how it works in a virtual power plant. I hope that answers your question.
So if it's so difficult,
that's a good question, but we've just started working with them on that. So hopefully they will talk about it more as they go. There is things coming. I shouldn't talk about it, but there is things coming that they're about to release in their buildings and around about what's happening with their energy supply and their renewable energy footprint. Watch this space.
So Richard's asked, any current 15 million forecasting models shared or open sourced?
Richard wants to know if we sell our token. No, we don't, Richard. You can buy it from us, but we don't open source it.
How easy is it to retrofit a system, or do you want to be buying a system to think it will be good?
Most of the new systems come. So the question is how easy to retrofit an old system, or do you want to buy a new system? Well, most of the newer systems come with some level of virtual power plant thinking behind them. Most of the new battery systems, most of the new inverters come with that sort of mindset already. However, in our case, we've spent a lot of time and we've built some pretty cool tools that allow us to quickly integrate new inverters and new systems into our platform, and they can be old ones. So we can do that pretty quickly if the business case for us and the client stacks up. So if you had someone who had a big bunch of old systems, rather than replace the systems, we would work out how to bring them into the system pretty quick. But as I said, new systems, most of them will be with some level of virtual power plant capability that still needs to be controlled, but capable for our easy connection for people like us. Yes, Greg.
as an ordinary person, what would I need to get benefits?
Greg's question is, as an ordinary household, what do I need? It's an interesting question because there's lots of different models in the marketplace right now. So you've got retailers doing different things. Some are offering you a fixed benefit every year for allowing them to use your battery to trade. Others are allowing you to trade it. So it depends. It's really about searching the market for what you want to do. And even our customers, our retailer customers who provide virtual power plant service to their customers, they have different models. So our platform, we've built it to be flexible to cater for those models, but they're rolling out different ways of engaging with the customers around their engagement with the virtual power plant. Does that answer your question? It really is horses for courses, and some of them are good deals and some of them are not so good deals. And I think that's part of the challenge.
Graham's asked about the attempt to put a 100 kilowatt system in their block units. A set of units through a body corporate in terms of the length of each unit, and that's turned out to be because of the regulations. So,
yeah.
Any ideas?
So the question is, they've put put a solar system on, or tried to put a solar system on a commercial property, and it's been difficult to get approval, a body corporate. He can contact me afterwards and I can put him in touch with someone who might be able to help him. But the other challenge is that this is an evolving space and those rules keep changing and evolving. There won't be too long till people like us, VPP operators, will have a set of rules that we'll have to abide by in the marketplace. Those are being defined at the moment. They won't stop us doing things. I'll just put that forecasting requirement will be one of those rules. So those things are changing all the time. It is difficult at the moment to get systems connected for commercial in some places. It just depends on where you are and what you're trying to do. Right to your member. How am I not an energy retailer? I choose not to be. So energy retailer is one function in the market, and that's buying and selling energy. There's a lot of cost to set up an energy retailer. We chose early on to partner with retailers to deliver our services. We want to focus on providing the best virtual power plant technology that we can. That's a choice we made as a new business to do that. Is it a natural progression for us? Maybe, maybe not. There are lots of retailers out there offering virtual power plant services through companies like us. So it definitely is, there's a tight fit for energy retailers to be virtual power plant suppliers. And again, is it sensible for them to spend lots of money building power plant platforms or work with companies like Karit? Same question applies. What's your focus and what you're best at?
What should governments be doing to encourage these extra services in the market?
I think governments need to seriously think about their policies around storage. So the question is, what should governments be doing around encouraging these services? They need to be seriously thinking about storage policy, energy storage, and helping to push that market up forward. The same with electric vehicles. Those two technologies have a big impact on the residential and the mid-sized commercial space in terms of the footprint. If you remember that snapshot we looked at a few weeks ago as part of Renew, that's a big chunk of the carbon footprint of the Gold Coast. So being able to bring more control to that energy using storage will be a big impact. In Europe, you know, they've had significant programs to incentivize the rollout of EVs, to incentivize the dispatch of storage. And yeah, they're seeing big benefits from that in their communities. Australia did it with solar panels. For some reason, governments have chosen not to do it. But they really need to help. Incentivizing will push that price down faster, that price curve, which will then make it more affordable for everybody.
So, another question for you. Online. Do all VPP units own control batteries, or are there some systems that can control the solar inverter as well as that up to market requirements? Do you mention future demand management?
The question is, does Karit or do VPPs? I guess it's the VPPs. All VPPs are different. So do VPPs control just storage, or there's other things, other technologies? Karit can control. We have systems with cogen units. We have systems with batteries, solar panels. We can engage with them at different levels. Theoretically, there's nothing that we can't do from a technology perspective. It's just the availability of those technologies in enough scale to make it worthwhile for everyone to do it. I can't speak for all VPP operators, because there are some VPP operators who are actually battery manufacturers and all they can control is their battery. But because we chose to be agnostic, I don't care whether it's an SMA or a SunGrow or a Fronius or Solar Edge inverter. I don't care whether it's an LG Chem or an Alpha ESS battery. It doesn't matter to us. We will supply and support whatever it is that's being delivered. The same with cogen units. We work with cogen units. We work with whatever the devices the customer's trying to integrate into their virtual power plant.
What's cogen?
Cogeneration. So think about biogas, just having a generator on your site, rather than a generator situated somewhere centrally, putting it on your site. So that will become important for some large industrial sites. as a backup when they have a cloudy day or something and they need to be able to run. A lot of them run diesel generators today. Those cogen units may run hydrogen, well, probably will run hydrogen in the future. So it's just an engine that generates electricity, and it's the fuel that will change over time.
So the last two questions I've blended together, it's just asking the difference between, say, Karit and Switchkin and Evergen and also the Kraken platform. So just what are the differentiations? You have to answer that.
So what's the difference between Switchkin and Evergen and Kraken? Well, there's a new one every week. So they're all similar in some ways and different in others, if that makes sense. So, for example, Switchkin is very similar in terms of the connected technology, but the way that they manage stuff in the cloud is different. Evergen is the same, different in the way they do it. Alpha ESS have their own virtual power plant, but that only works with Alpha ESS batteries. So each VPP is slightly different. And if you think about a VPP, you really need to think about the technology problem you're trying to solve. What we found with our customers, and the reason we went agnostic, and when I was at Ergon, we built the world's first integrated market VPP, working one. And we did it with a technology partner, and then we wanted to try a different company, and we couldn't do it. It was too hard. And the cost to do it was going to cost us more than the project to do the original rollout. So that's why at Karit, we went down the agnostic path. So the customers will have this mismatch of technology. They'll add technology to their virtual power plants over time, and it'll be different and change. And so the ability to manage that becomes important. Some virtual power plants have that flexibility, some don't. We pride ourselves in being able to, we spend a lot of time building that integration capability as part of our suite.
Next question is, what are the comms network that you use? For example, mobile phone, satellite, what do you comms network?
What is the comms network that we use? So we primarily use mobile network. Bandwidth and speed is the reason. We've tried other networks like LoRa and some of those, but we don't find that they give us the bandwidth we need for what we like to do. But we also can use Wi-Fi, we can use the fixed internet service. We have lots of flexibility about the way that we get the messaging back. So we're pretty flexible about that. We have a preference for mobile, particularly in dense areas like cities. But as I said, to us, it's just a device we put inside our Karit cake to connect the comms piece up. Wi-Fi we try and avoid, residential Wi-Fi in particular, because people change their passwords, it falls over, no one knows it's offline for 3 days because their mobile keeps getting them signal. And if you're trying to run a virtual power plant and have uptime, running off a customer's Wi-Fi network, nightmare. So we strongly recommend to our customers not to use Wi-Fi. Commercial Wi-Fi is different because it's a managed service, but as a residential property, running on the NBN, not a fun thing. So.
If I'm in a virtual power plant, do I get a bill from a retailer and a bill from you? Or just see one?
If you're in a virtual power plant, you get a bill from me and a bill from the retailer. If your retailer is a Karit customer, you just get a bill from the retailer. If you're a commercial customer, you get a bill from us if we're running your VPP. So you'd get 2 bills. It depends on the scenario. Yeah.
And then I hope that my savings from my retailer.
Well, part of what Karit does is we do a business case with you before we roll out a VPP so that you don't get that situation. Oh, I just spent all that money with you guys and it doesn't work. So if the stack doesn't work for us in terms of the value stacks for you as a customer, we will tell you and walk away. It's part of who we are, it's our DNA.
Yeah, just want to sit silent in the background or if you're bored.
So we run services for some of our customers where so not only do we provide the platform, we might provide an operations and management platform of the process service where we'll make sure all their assets are running. That's part of what we do for the council. For some of our other customers, we actually do the trading on their behalf. So we set the triggers and the manage that whole process in the platform. They'll give us the input in terms of their strategy, but then we'll run it. So depending how mature our customers are, that's how we run our system.
We've got 3 minutes to go, so any more questions?
Yes, Greg.
Sorry, I'm going to ask a confidential one here. Has it been worthwhile you seeing your business?
Has it been worthwhile? I hope so. we're a startup, we're still growing, still starting. So, but we personally we started this. So let me give you a little bit of the Karit story. Karit was me and my two partners in crime who were both Kiwis. They live in Christchurch. They ran a distribution business. They become pretty disenfranchised with the way businesses are running. I worked in a large retail business at a senior level. I'd become pretty disenfranchised about our inability to deliver real value to customers. So we got together and we created Karit. And our purpose is, we saw this change coming and we figured that we needed to create something that allowed businesses and customers to make the energy transition without all the pain of being left on their own to do it. So we've been running for 4 years this month. We've really been offering solutions to customers for 2 years, but we had a COVID thing in the middle. So it's early days for us, but the customers that we're working with, they love us, they're working well, and they're seeing the value savings. So I would say yes, but.
How much bandwidth do you use to run something? Like, so put Wi-Fi up to it, and you run it.
Yeah, we run a 4G SIM. Oh, so what's the bandwidth we use? So we use 4G SIM. The reason we use that and not LoRaWAN is we found that that didn't give us the response time for some things. If we were just collecting the data, LoRaWAN will be all right, but sometimes when we need to send a signal and get a response back, LoRaWAN doesn't just cut it. Plus, the network is not as pervasive as some of the others yet. 5G will come. That'll become part of the puzzle for us.
Will that help? Or like that?
Maybe, don't know. We'll just play that as we go. Wi-Fi does give you the bandwidth that you need, but the reliability of the Wi-Fi is the issue. So, and maybe Elon Musk will give me a free ride on his satellites. Who knows? Is it? Any questions?
No, look, it's instead of the most suitable PPP to go with, what is your advice to that?
Suiting for the most, talk to Karit first. Do your research, but talk to Karit first. If you're a large business wanting to work out the right VPP solution, come talk to us first, because that's an area we specialize in designing those. And then we can point you to our partners who roll out residential ones.
Another question. It appears to use variable FITs.
Feed-in tariffs?
Feed-in tariffs, yes. What's the transparency for customers?
So we use variable feed-in tariffs. What's the transfer? We actually don't provide a feed-in tariff. So when you're exposed to the market, you get the market price. So as the market booms, you get nice, healthy feed-in tariffs. When the market's at minus $1,000, you pay to ship your energy to the grid. So that's part of the challenge. Retailers will give you the feed-in tariff. But as you can probably get from what I just said, if you're pushing all your solar to your energy retailer in the middle of the day, giving you 5-6 cents a kilowatt hour, they're not really that happy about doing it. So it's not cheap energy for them. So they will incentivize you to move your energy.
Will Karit be rolled across Australia?
Karit runs across Australia today and in New Zealand, and we're currently looking at projects in the US.
That's the last question, Brett. Can you just hold it up for everybody and thank them? You have to repeat what you said.
Okay, Judy's asked me to roll this up. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks everyone for joining online. This was a bit of a test for us at Renew to do this hybrid event. And it's been fun for me. And hopefully you've all learned something about virtual power plants and the energy transition. And feel free to drop me a note if you've got any questions and you want some advice. Thanks everyone for joining. And join Gold Coast Renew. If you live on the Gold Coast, come and join us. We could use your help to get the story out there.